First of all, welcome to all of you here. You are here at the seat of the Australian Institute of International Affairs, of which I've been a member for a long time, and it's highly recommended that you join. We have amazing meetings once a week, basically, and talking about international affairs, and always very interesting. And what I'm going to try to do now is to get them more interested in Africa and in France, which they haven't done for a while. The second point is the main purpose of this event is to celebrate and make known the existence of a French-Australian Lawyers Society, which has been going for about 3 years. And I should say the association, the society, the French-Australian Lawyers Society, has as its, I think one of the patrons is Murray Gleeson, the ex-Chief Justice of Australia, and still very active at the moment. He was just responsible for preparing a report on the ICAC reforms. The first speaker I'm going to introduce you to is Professor Benoit Lebas. Benoit has long experience in law generally, but he has become a specialist in OHADA Law. That's OHADA. Now, he will explain to you what that is very briefly. But he's also a specialist arbitrator. He's appeared as an arbitrator, as well as presenting cases for one or the other party in arbitration on an international basis, and mainly, well, not mainly, but substantially involving Africa. He's also what they call a distinguished, I don't know how you become a distinguished professor, but he's called a distinguished adjunct professor of law at Vermont University in the USA. The latest achievement is that he's been named the official legal advisor to the government of Senegal. For those of you who don't know much about Senegal, is about 3-4 years ago there was a change of power, there was a democratic election, there was a handover as good as it gets in Australia, and the new president is actually very progressive and is trying to reform the laws and to go ahead with economic development. Interestingly, Australia had announced 2 years ago that they were opening an embassy in Senegal this year. So it gives you an idea of how important Australia is looking at Francophone Africa and West Africa. But somehow in the last budget, they say it's for budgetary reasons, they decided not to open the embassy in Senegal, but against that they opened 5 embassies in Southeast Asia, including in Cambodia and other places. So that's quite interesting. We had the minister, the Secretary for Foreign Affairs in Canberra, and the question was asked, why did you not open in Senegal? And he said, for budget reasons. And when we pointed out that instead he opened 5 embassies somewhere else, he said they were going for the biggest hit for their dollar. But you know, this is something we need to address, and we believe that with the staff we have at DFAT that they're going to start going back into Francophone Africa. So what what Benoit might be talking to you about today is going to become extremely relevant for Australia. It is relevant now, but we'll become aware that it is relevant in at least 2 or 3 years' time, when we realize we're way behind the 8 ball in relation to international business in Africa. And just to put it into context, we were told at this conference in Canberra, at which Benoit spoke, that Australian investment in Africa over the last 20 years is now, in mining only, is now something like $54 billion. The value of extractions from mining in Africa by Australian companies exceeds $1 trillion. And we think it's going to be something like $3 trillion by the time the mines have run out, etc. And even the $1 trillion is far in excess of any Australian investment in China so far. And yet everyone's rushing, I was going to say like sheep, but to China when there's $1 trillion worth of money being held in Africa. So what I'm saying to you is there's a problem, and we hope that Benoit, through his expertise, will start making Australians understand there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to do in Africa through something like the OHADA Law. So welcome, Benoit.
Thank you very much. What we'll be talking about this evening is existing since 22 years. I know that for many people OHADA is something pretty new, but for me, I work in this area of law since 17 years, and most of my time in Africa. So the first thing you must know, and this is a practice also for François Tsenville, my partner, in charge of the Desk Afrique of the law firm in Paris. We already know that Africa is not only mining and natural resources, it's also many areas like construction, infrastructures, and all the services, education, because Africa is now moving, Africa is raising for many reasons, and we'll be talking about this. Briefly about the law firm, we accepted to come today because we often work with law firms here, as we are a boutique law firm in Paris dedicated to international law and arbitration, and counsel in Africa, and a team of 25 people in Paris and other lawyers in the US and also in Belgium, with a network of people in 45 countries in Africa, out of 54. We managed to handle the problems on the ground with big law firms who don't have any specialists or want to be focused on our area of practice, basically tax law, business law, and international arbitration and litigation. And so that's what we do, basically. And our, let's say, philosophy is to be working with other lawyers in different countries, not only Australia. The last case I handled was with Hardy Bowen in Perth, for example. But people from all over the world to try to help their clients in Africa. So moving to OHADA. OHADA is existing since 1993. It's an international treaty signed in Mauritius, and basically it's very simple. It's a uniform system of substantial law. It means you've got the same rule of law, specifically in business law, in 17 countries in West and Central Africa. These countries represent today 30% of the African continent and 35% of the population. So it's huge. It's 1/3 of Africa if we talk about economy. In this area, you can create a corporation the same way. For the different countries, you can sign a commercial contract, securities law is the same, bankruptcy law is the same, arbitration law is the same, and we try to go into the details afterwards. In most of these countries, 15 out of 17, you've got the same currency. In most of these countries, you also have the same language, which is French, and also in 2 others, Spanish and English. The DRC, which is the most important country today, entered the agreements 3 years ago, in 2012, and now they try to implement OHADA. And this is very important because it's a way to regulate also DRC, which was and still is a difficult country. In this context, of course, the place of OHADA law, and specifically the 17 countries from West and Central Africa, seems to turn to be a kind of model for the rest of Africa. Not because we want to implement civil law system in English, in common law countries, but just the idea of OHADA. OHADA, I tell you just after, is a system of harmonization, and the idea for this country is to try to harmonize also their rules of business law and more rapidly, probably, there are rules of litigation and basically arbitration. So, if we talk about OHADA itself now, the OHADA system is very simple. Here you've got the different acts. This is a uniform system of law. As I told you, it's like having an act, for example, a corporation act, which will be applicable the same way in 17 countries. You don't have a different rule of law for corporations in the state members. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benoit. Among you today is a man named Ian Courtling. And Ian and I and other people back in 1986 started the Australia Africa Business Council, of which I'm president now. The reason I'm mentioning it is that back then we organized a lunch at which Oliver Tambo, who was then the leader of the African National Congress, came and spoke. At the time, the African National Congress was known as a terrorist organization, and it wasn't that easy to get them to come here. And to put it in context, Nelson Mandela was still in jail. And on that day, and it's mainly because of Ian that this happened, that we got Oliver Tambo here. But on that day, I was asked to make the speech to thank Oliver Tambo for his speech, and I said at the time it was a historical occasion, and it turned out to be a historical occasion. And today, you may not know it, but I believe you are witnessing a historical occasion, because today is only the second time that OHADA has been discussed in Australia. And the first time was just recently in Canberra when we had the Africa-Australia annual conference. And I can tell you it was quite a fight to get the organizers to agree to allow Benoit to speak. But the point is this, that OHADA and the future of business in Africa is extremely important for Australia, and it's just a matter of us understanding that, notwithstanding the fact that at the moment it's a Francophone system, that it can also equally be applied very quickly to the Anglophone part of Africa, because it's just a matter of translating the code from French into English. And in fact, in Mauritius, we constantly work with, for instance, a criminal code which is in French and in English. And there's no problem in applying the same law in two languages. Now, this might sound very simple, but it's quite a challenge, because, what I'm saying is that with the OHADA system, which has been proved for 20 years in Africa, which is now being applied in the Caribbean islands, one then wonders why can't it be applied in Anglophone Africa, and yet there's quite a resistance to it even among Australians here, right? So what I'm saying is today's the first step of us starting to understand what OHADA is about and how it can be useful to Australian companies, especially the mining companies in Africa. I'm grateful to Benoit for not forgetting to mention Mauritius. One of the things which is happening next year, which you should all be aware of, is for the first time ever, there's going to be the first Congress of Commercial and International Arbitration held in Africa. And it's going to be held in Mauritius. And I'm one of the ambassadors for the Congress, which is going to be on next year. So if you're thinking of getting married, or if your girlfriend in the crowd is thinking of getting married, I should also let you know that if you attend the conference, you can get married within 24 hours in Mauritius if you do the right paperwork. So why not combine business with pleasure? if you think getting married is a pleasure. I'm actually a divorce lawyer from time to time. I'm a divorce lawyer, so I can organize recycling. Now, but to get back to the serious issues, the point is that in Mauritius, we have as our top court of law the Privy Council. And I've actually appeared in the Privy Council in London in relation to a Mauritius case with Mauritian lawyers. So what we have in Mauritius is something fairly unique in that when everyone says, well, Africa, you know, it's a bit corrupt and, you know, the judges are a bit dodgy and all that, well, you go to the Privy Council, and when I appeared, it was actually in 10 Downing Street. So you actually go next door to 10 Downing Street, and all these Japanese tourists take pictures of you, and you become very famous wearing your wig and gown in Downing Street. So the point is, it's quite exciting, quite interesting. There's a lot to be done even for Australian lawyers if one gets involved in fields unknown. And what better way to improve yourself than to stretch your comfort zone and go to Mauritius? You know, I mean, it could be worse, but Mauritius is not a bad place to start stretching your comfort zone. Now, this is all bringing me to the next speaker, who is one of my good friends from Mauritius. We've known each other for a long time, and his name is François de Senneville. It's almost even more complicated than Roger de Robillard. But the problem is, once you get to know how to say the name of people in Mauritius, then you're almost within the system and you can be a success. So you'll have to learn his name, François de Senneville. Now, François has been an accountant. He's a lawyer by training, but he's also an accountant. And he's been with Deloitte and working as the head of the Africa desk for more than 20 years. The problem with accountants, and that's why I prefer the professor to François, the problem with accountants, they always live in the past. They're always telling you what's happened yesterday and trying to justify it tomorrow. But they're the ones who really make you money because they know how to fiddle the taxes and all that sort of thing. So François has made it his specialty to travel all the way from Paris to Mauritius almost once a month. And he spends a week in Mauritius. He works very hard. He's got this office where when you sit there you can see blue water, you know, the reef, and etc., etc. So, but that's his lifestyle. François de Senneville.
Yes, I have been spending some 22 years in Deloitte, which is an extraordinary firm where I learned how to accompany globally my clients. And I think you understood that I was an African, a native from Mauritius, proud of it, and time of Africa has come. And the reason why we are today with you is to insist on this point. This is a strong conviction for me, for Lazareth Lebar, and we are sure that the potential for us to work together is enormous. I used to say, Benoit, an ocean of opportunity in a desert of professionals to bring you there. So, this is not a joke. This is a strong conviction that all of you will have in the coming years to focus on Africa, for the simple reason that your client will be in Africa. In 2030, Africa is expected to be as China today. So you can imagine the problem for the lawyers who cannot accompany their client where the growth will be. These are facts. So yesterday it was a luxury to assist in Africa, and I can tell you my conviction, and I see that every day. Today, of course, the natural way for an Australian lawyer is to keep in mind, to be sure to accompany the client in China, in Asia. But don't forget Africa. What we see in Paris is the spring of the tax, the Africa desk in law firm, not always with people with real background to accompany. This is only because it's a need, and we quickly need people to focus on that. You understood that we are there to network, we are there to emphasize on this message, we are there to know you more, and we hope, we are sure that there will be space to work together and to help you. We can be in front, we can be below, we are very flexible. What is important for us is to take all of these opportunities in Africa for us. Today the water comes in the mountain and goes to the river. Why? Because we are not structured enough, we are not speaking loud on our capacity to accompany this project. So if we don't do that, all other people will do it.